Good morning. English is an international language. In introduction, according to Crystal, 1997, more people use English today than have used any other language in the history of the world. English is the international language par excellence. Estimates of the number of speakers and database perhaps 380 million have English as a first language, but more than a million people use it as a second or additional language, largely to communicate with their second language users with whom they do not share cultures and background. Thus, people from the so called quote English speaking countries are now in the military among English users and native speaker of the language no longer determine how the language is being used internationally. In report commissioned by the British Council observes that English now is a new phenomenon and if it represents any kind of threat, it is probably not a case for celebration by native speakers. What makes English is an international language? English is an international language in a global and a local sense. She observed that as an international language, English is used both in a global sense for international communication between countries and a local sense as a language of wider communication within multilingual societies. However, we would contend that these two senses of the word international need not signify two separate categories. Between local and global, the widespread use for international technology for communication, for example, the use of internet has made it increasingly difficult to distinguish between local and international interaction for people using their computers at home. With the outsourcing of business, such as call centers, it is now becoming more and more difficult to identify whether one is speaking to a local representative or someone situated overseas. Putting aside the above mentioned complexities and the expression of cultures, she maintains that in a global sense, one of the primary functions of the English is to enable speakers to share with others their ideas and cultures. English becomes embedded in the culture of the country in which it is used. The view of an international language is an advanced one. Then, any language fulfills two main functions. It is the main medium of the human communication, but it is also a symbol of identity. English is not only national language. English is not only an international language but a national language as well. Through an international language, we try to communicate across cultures within the across national boundaries. A national language has of course impose communicate functions but also carries symbolic ones. First one, the dominant nations, the identity function of the one small language variation. They tend to believe that variation between national variation is mainly restricted to the spoken language. They often confuse national and regional variation. For instance, identifying Australia and English as really cockney. The dominant natives believe themselves to be an norm states and view the other national variations of derivatives from that norm. Three circles. The three circles of the English using. He used the term Lingno circle to refer the countries where English is used as a primary language, such as in the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and Canada. They used outer circle to refer the countries where English is used as a second language. And also many speakers from IC countries now live in OC and EC countries. In addition, there is an emerging shifting the circles in some countries. Royal Netherlands. The Royal Netherlands Academy of Science also published a paper Academy 2003 aimed to protecting Dutch as an academic language. So the questions of whether or not it is in English or a language is international communication itself with skills other languages. Uses of norms. One of the central demands about the role of English as a language of the international communication has revolved around the nations of the norms. The diffusion of English has resulted in the three norm related issue. However, such questions about norms and standards mainly focus on the limited areas of grammatical and phonological variation resulting from the spread of English worldwide. Thus seems the image from the view of language which is reminiscent of interlanguage studies of 1970s and in which language was treated as if it only considered two of the formal features of syntax and phonology. The position of English. Historical English owns much of the position of the international language to the demographic, economic, and political power of the English speaking countries. In this context, tertiary education in English is still predominantly associated with Anglo academic norms. If education is truly to become international, the norms of academic discourse should be internationally rather than demanding submission of to a particular set of norms. Response to globalization. The question of the most desirable linguistic response to the globalization of the English as a vehicle for international communication via other language remains. Some favor the adoption of the particular variety as a medium international communication. Then, as discussed above, programmatics and programmatic norms, which are very much subject to cross cultural differences, are central to language. Conclusion. English is the foremost and by some accounts the only world language. Beyond that, there is no academic consequence about which language qualify. Arabic, French, Russian, and Spanish or other possible world language. Some authors consider Latin to have formerly been a world language. It was only during the 20th century that English started overtaking French, and before long, English was the most widely spoken and written language that was ever existed. If English is the world's first global lingua franca. There are six official languages of the UN. There are Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. The first, probably the most important reason why the English language became popularized in the British Empire. Before colonizing around one fourth of the entire planet, the British were the only ones speaking English, and the language was confined to the British Isles. Thank you for listening.